He slid a single sheet of paper across the kitchen table, and before I even read the words, I knew my marriage was over. "She's not my daughter, Emily," Daniel said, not looking at me, not looking at Sophie's crayon drawings still taped to the fridge behind him. "The test is right there. Read it yourself." I was still holding a strawberry cheesecake in my hands. I remember that detail more than almost anything else from that night. How ridiculous it felt to be standing in my own kitchen, holding his favorite dessert, while my entire life quietly caved in around me. Welcome back to the Family Revenge Tales. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 42 years old, and before that Friday night, I would have told you I had a good marriage. Not perfect, good. I work as a regional operations manager for a medical supply company outside Charlotte, North Carolina. My whole career is built on noticing things other people miss. A shipment that's 12 hours late, a number that doesn't quite add up, a pattern hiding inside a spreadsheet. I'm good at my job because I don't let small inconsistencies slide. I've caught $20,000 errors before they became disasters. I never thought to apply that same instinct to my own husband. That Friday started like any other. Daniel texted me around 4 in the afternoon. "Come home, we have wonderful news." I smiled at my phone like a teenager. He'd been up for a regional promotion for months, and I was certain that was it. On my way home, I stopped at the bakery on Providence Road and bought his favorite dessert, strawberry cheesecake, the kind with the glaze on top that he always ate too fast and complained about the sugar rush afterward. I remember humming in the car. I remember thinking, finally, some good news for us. I remember all of that because it makes what happened 20 minutes later so much worse. When I walked into the house, it wasn't just Daniel. His mother was sitting stiffly on the couch. His brother Mark stood near the window with his arms crossed. Nobody smiled. Nobody said hello. My daughter Sophie, 4 years old, was upstairs. I could hear the cartoon playing faintly through the baby monitor Daniel still kept on the counter out of habit. I set the cheesecake down on the table, and that's when Daniel slid the paper toward me. "There's something you need to know about Sophie," he said. I laughed, actually laughed, because for a half second, I thought it was a joke in terrible taste. Then I read the header, DNA paternity test results. Probability of paternity? Excluded. "Daniel, this isn't funny." "I'm not laughing, Emily." His voice was flat, rehearsed, like he'd said the words to himself in the mirror 100 times before saying them to me. "I had it done quietly. I needed to know." "Sophie was born after 3 years of fertility treatments," I said. "You were there for every single appointment. You held her 30 seconds after she was born. You cut the cord." "Science doesn't lie," he said, and something about the way he said it, calm, distant, already decided, made my stomach drop in a way the DNA report itself hadn't. His mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark just stared at the floor. Nobody in that room had come to ask me a question. They had come already believing an answer. Before I could even process what I was feeling, Daniel reached into a folder and pulled out a second document, a divorce agreement. Already drafted, already detailed, down to which accounts would be split and which property would be sold. "If you sign tonight," he said, "we can keep this quiet. No lawyers dragging it out. No one else needs to know." That was the moment something in me went cold and still, the way it does right before I catch a real problem at work. Because in 14 years together, I had never once seen Daniel move that fast on anything. He couldn't decide on a paint color for the living room in under a month. And yet somehow, in the same breath as accusing me of the worst betrayal of our marriage, he already had a full legal document ready for my signature? I didn't sign it that night. I told him I needed time, gathered a bag for Sophie, her medicine, her stuffed rabbit, her favorite blanket, and left. The cheesecake stayed on the counter, untouched. I think about that sometimes. How something as small as an uneaten dessert can end up meaning so much. What Daniel didn't know was that I'd already been suspicious of him for weeks. I'd caught him photographing documents from the file cabinet in our office. Property records from my grandfather's estate, investment statements, even paperwork related to Sophie's trust fund. When I asked, he said he was updating our insurance. I wanted to believe him, but some quiet part of me hadn't, and that part had already reached out to Walter Bennett, the attorney who'd handled my grandfather's estate for over a decade. Walter was 64, precise, unhurried, the kind of man who read every line of a contract twice before he'd let you sign it once. I called him that night from my car, Sophie asleep in her car seat behind me. "Walter," I said, my voice shaking. "I think my marriage just ended, and I think something else is happening that I don't understand yet." Walter didn't ask me if I was okay. He asked me a different question. "Who collected the DNA sample, Emily, and where?" I didn't know. Daniel hadn't said. "Find out," Walter told me, "before you sign anything." It took less than a week to find the crack in the story. Walter contacted the laboratory listed on the report. It was a real lab, that part was true, which almost made it worse. It meant someone had gone through the trouble of making a lie look legitimate. But when Walter compared the collection date and location on the report to Sophie's actual schedule that week, the two didn't match. Sophie had been at daycare the entire day the sample was supposedly collected. She hadn't been anywhere near a lab. "If that sample wasn't Sophie's," Walter said to me quietly across his office desk, "then whose was it?" I didn't have an answer, but I had a new question now, and once I start asking questions, I don't stop. Around the same time, Walter discovered something that had nothing to do with paternity and everything to do with money. Someone had recently attempted to take out financing against a piece of property I'd inherited from my grandfather, property that was legally mine alone. The attempt had failed because the paperwork was incomplete, but the documents used in that attempt were copies of the exact files Daniel had been photographing weeks earlier. I sat in Walter's office and felt the floor shift under me for the second time in 2 weeks. This was never really about Sophie. Sophie was the distraction. I was the target, and my grandfather's land was the prize. I hired a forensic accountant named Dana Ruiz to look deeper into Daniel's finances. What she found took my breath away. Nearly $180,000 in hidden debt, secret credit cards, a failed cryptocurrency investment, unpaid personal loan from a coworker, back taxes he'd never mentioned, even money quietly borrowed against his own retirement account. Daniel wasn't just unhappy in our marriage, he was drowning. And he had been for a long time, silently, while I sat across from him at dinner asking how his day went. A normal divorce, with lawyers and financial disclosures, would have exposed every bit of it. He needed something faster, something that would make me too ashamed, too hurt, too rushed to look closely at anything. He needed me broken enough to sign quickly and quietly before anyone started asking the kind of questions I ask for a living. Dana also found messages between Daniel and his brother Mark sent in the days before that Friday night. Mark had believed the DNA story at first, but one message sent 2 days before the ambush told a different truth. Daniel had written, "Once she sees it, she won't want anyone to know. She'll sign fast just to keep it quiet." He wasn't talking about a betrayed husband seeking the truth. He was talking about a woman he expected to fold under shame. I won't pretend I was strong through all of it. There was a night about 6 weeks in when I sat on my mother's back porch with Sophie asleep inside, and I told Walter over the phone that I was tired. My legal bills were climbing, I was still trying to show up for work every day and be present for my daughter every night, and some nights I genuinely wondered if it would just be easier to give Daniel what he wanted and disappear from the fight entirely. My own father, when I called him crying, told me maybe it would be simpler to just settle and move on. I can earn the money back, I told Walter. I don't know if I can keep living like this. Walter was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I've never forgotten. He's not offering you peace, Emily. He's offering you silence, and he's charging you everything you have for it. I didn't sign. While I held on, Daniel's world started coming apart on its own. His employer opened an internal investigation after irregularities surfaced in expense reports tied to some of his hidden debt. Mark started asking harder questions once he learned the DNA collection date on the report didn't line up. Even Daniel's mother, who had sat so stiffly on my couch that first night, began to have doubts she couldn't quite say out loud. Through the proper legal process, a real DNA test was finally ordered, one with verified chain of custody, verified identity, everything done correctly. The result confirmed what I had known in my bones the entire time. Daniel was, and had always been, Sophie's biological father. I thought I would feel triumphant reading that report. Instead, I felt something closer to grief. I wasn't relieved to be right. I was angry that the truth about my own daughter had needed a laboratory signature before anyone close to me was willing to believe it. By the time mediation came around, months later, Daniel believed I was exhausted enough to sign whatever was put in front of me. He walked in with a revised agreement, calm, almost pleasant, like a man closing an ordinary business deal. My attorney set one condition before anything else could move forward. The original DNA report needed to be entered into the record alongside the lab's actual collection data. I watched something behind Daniel's eyes go still. One by one, the documents came out. The laboratory inconsistencies, the property records showing the failed financing attempt, Dana's financial findings, the messages between Daniel and Mark, the employer's internal investigation. Daniel tried to explain, his voice rising for the first time in months. "It wasn't supposed to go to court," he said. "I just needed you to cooperate." That was the sentence that told me everything. The fake report was never meant to survive scrutiny. It was only ever meant to survive me. My grief, my shame, my fear of what people would think. He hadn't needed evidence. He'd needed me to stop asking questions. Months later, I agreed to one final family conversation, this time at Walter's office instead of my kitchen table. I didn't walk in carrying cheesecake. I walked in carrying folders. I laid out everything, calmly, the way I would present a quarterly report at work. The fabricated test, the hidden debts, the attempted property financing, the messages. Mark admitted he'd helped arrange that first night, believing Daniel's story, and looked physically ill when he understood what he'd actually taken part in. My father finally said the words I'd needed to hear for months. "I should have stood up for you that night. I'm sorry." "So am I," I told him. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It was just the beginning of one. Daniel's consequences didn't arrive all at once the way they might in a movie. They arrived slowly, the way real consequences usually do. He lost the financial gamble that had driven him to lie in the first place. He faced professional scrutiny at work. The attempted property transaction brought legal consequences of its own. He entered treatment for the financial and gambling behavior that had quietly wrecked his life for years. And for a long while, his time with Sophie was limited and supervised, while trust was slowly, carefully rebuilt. I sold the house not because Daniel had won anything, but because I didn't want my daughter growing up inside the walls where the worst night of our lives had happened. Sophie and I moved into a smaller brick house in the suburbs, with a fenced yard and a maple tree out front. A house that belonged only to the two of us, and whatever came next. My relationship with my father is still being rebuilt, piece by piece. He shows up now. He helped Sophie build a little playhouse in the backyard last spring. It's slow, and it's not perfect, but it's real. Daniel is, slowly, rebuilding a relationship with Sophie too, in supervised visits, in small steps. She still loves him, and I would never take that from her. But I stopped protecting him from what he'd done. When he once asked me, quietly, if I would ever forgive him, I told him the truth. Forgiveness isn't the work in front of us, Daniel. Becoming someone Sophie can trust again is. A few months ago, I stopped at that same bakery on Providence Road. I bought a strawberry cheesecake. The same kind, the same glaze. For a moment, standing at the counter, I felt that old cold drop in my stomach, remembering the night everything fell apart. But this time, I wasn't carrying it home to a man with a folder full of lies. I was carrying it home to my daughter. We sat together on our porch that evening, and Sophie laughed, trying to pick every strawberry off the top before I could even cut the first slice. And for the first time in a long time, I laughed too. I used to think revenge meant watching Daniel lose everything, watching him suffer the way I had. I know now that isn't what actually healed me. Real justice, it turns out, is quieter than that. It's refusing to sign something out of fear. It's asking one more question when everyone expects you to stay silent. It's protecting your child without turning her into a weapon. It's building a peaceful life that no longer depends on anyone else believing you. Daniel expected shame to make me disappear. Instead, it made me start asking questions. That's the difference between a woman who breaks and a woman who simply stops carrying the weight of someone else's lies. If this story moved you, if any part of it reminded you of your own strength, please subscribe to the Family Revenge Tales. We tell these stories because so many of you are living quiet versions of them right now, wondering if anyone would believe you if you spoke up. We believe you, and we'll keep telling these stories until more people do too. Wherever you are tonight, remember this. A lie only has power over you as long as it convinces you to stop asking questions. The moment you start looking closer, you take that power back. What makes a story like Emily's valuable isn't the drama of the accusation or the satisfaction of watching Daniel's plan collapse. It's the quieter lesson underneath it. That emotional manipulation often relies on speed and shame rather than truth, and that the most powerful response to it isn't rage, but patience and careful attention. Emily's story teaches viewers to slow down before signing anything under pressure, to seek professional guidance when something feels wrong, even without proof, and to trust the instinct that tells them a story doesn't quite add up. It's a reminder that real strength in family conflict isn't about winning a dramatic confrontation, but about protecting the people who depend on you, especially children, while refusing to let fear make your decisions. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that healing doesn't require revenge in the traditional sense. Sometimes the most complete justice is simply reclaiming your peace, your home, and your voice.